Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to Yerba Mate Talks. Today we are missing our wonderful hermano Max, but we do have me, Issa, the Prince of Peace, and we have Dr. J here, and we will be talking about the amazing debate that we saw today. So, like, subscribe, and we're going to get into a good talk. We will put the StreamYard into the chat if folks want to come up and have an interesting discussion. Okay. Yes. So this is the StreamYard. So please come on up if you're interested. Um, so we're going to start with our openers. So, um, Dr. J, what did you think? Or you know what? We'll start with like an overview. What did you feel about the debate as a whole?
Yeah, going into the debate, I was kind of like, okay, both these guys have done it a lot, right? They've both done tons of debates. So I didn't know the atheist guy, so I was kind of curious to hear what he had to say. I've heard the other guy talk a whole bunch of times, so I was curious to see what would happen. I was expecting something a little bit better in the sense that they were really experienced. So that's kind of my feelings going into the debate. What were you thinking?
So I actually knew Stuart Knechtle. I know Cliff and Stuart. I've seen them debate a lot. I think they're really funny. I think Stuart's pretty eloquent. I think they're a really kind of interesting dynamic duo where Cliff is very heart centered, like his passion for Christianity is very much like that, and then Stuart is sort of like the modern intellectual, and it's really interesting to see their kind of dynamics together. I've heard of Dan Barker, but I've never seen him debate before, but I'm kind of familiar about him in the scene. Um, I was kind of surprised by the position that, certain positions that were taken, and it was interesting where the discussion went. It was not exactly what I expected from what was described, but I definitely
Yeah,
think that that was
I I,
interesting.
I was disappointed. I mean, I don't want to get into too many details, but I was a little disappointed overall. I thought um, we didn't talk about Christianity being intellectually defensible much of the time. Um, I, I thought um, I thought Stewart jumped all over the place. Ran tons of arguments that were totally all over the place, and so the topic didn't get stuck to it all. I was a little disappointed.
I kind of felt that way too. I really was more interested in was Christianity, is Christianity defensible? And that's I asked a question actually in the super chat because I'm like, this is what we're really supposed to be focusing on. I mean, we're not going to go too deep in this, but I was like, why are we talking about atheism when we're talking about Christianity? Atheism is not the topic here. So I noticed that atheism was brought up a lot, and I was like, I don't see the purpose of that, but we can go into that a little bit deeper. Let's start off with the openers. So we'll start off with Stuart's opener. What do you think?
Oh, I thought Stewart uh, has debated so much that he didn't prep an opener at all, and kind of rambled a bunch of random arguments, and I don't remember them very well. It wasn't very well put together. It was just sort of like, I'm at the gym, except he wasn't at the gym, but I'm at the gym and oh shoot, I've got a debate. He's like me, or something like, oh no, I got to appear on this stream, but I don't want to miss my workout, so I have nothing prepared. I can't share anything. Let me just riff. That was what his opener felt like to me.
I definitely felt that he's very charismatic and charming. So I think that that was what he was riding on. So he's like, here's my charisma. I have some intellectual background and things. I'm going to throw these things out here and I'm going to kind of rely on that. And I think, that's what he was going on. Um, I definitely think a presentation is always a good thing. Have a PowerPoint, Prezi, whatever. Have something so your arguments can be laid out succinctly and you know, um, help, because that's the whole point of your opener, is that's what you're going to build on throughout the rest of your debate. So
And that was a
yeah,
complete fail.
yeah,
He was, we'll get to the other one here in a second, but certainly for Stewart's, was not clear. There weren't certain arguments that like, oh, I'll watch the opener and I know what they argued about the whole time. That was not the case. You going to know what they argued about necessarily based on his opener.
completely agree. What did you think about Dan's opening argument?
I was also a little disappointed in Dan's because it seemed like his was kind of like a reaction to Stewart's, and I wasn't really sure he had prepared anything either. He also seems like he's done a bazillion debates, um, super well read, all that stuff, and so I didn't feel like I could clearly delineate what his arguments were after the opening intro either.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think he, Dan's Dan's opening was, first of all, he said let's do introductions, so it was kind of a weird stopping point where they're like, okay, we're going to talk about what our backgrounds are, and I'm like, yeah, maybe that should have been done at the very beginning, but I mean, I guess I could see how that's a helpful thing to do.
Mhm.
But it was weird. It kind of stopped the debate for a bit. Um, then it was kind of linked to him being a pastor and having this experience of being a pastor. And um, yeah, I don't really feel, his opening was kind of problematic for me because I'm like, you have a job. Like, he later, I think, I don't want to spoil it, but he later kind of engages this and tries to say the onus is on the Christian. I'm like, it's really not. You are the person who's the prosecutor. You're proving that Christianity is not defensible. And I don't think he knew what the task was. It's his job to prove that Christianity is indefensible, because the Christian already believes that it is. So you have to poke holes in the argument of Christianity and showcase why Christianity is intellectually, doesn't work. And I was waiting to hear those arguments and I didn't hear any of them. So I was like, it was very disappointing for me because I'm like, this is your job. You have to do this. Um, Christians can make tons of arguments of why Christianity is defensible. So you now have to prove why it's not. And saying, okay, there's some bad things here. Okay. And moral presentism. I'm like, I don't, that was not compelling for me. So that's kind of what I felt.
I certainly would have liked to have seen a more clear presentation. Here's my main points. This is what I would discuss. He did a more reaction to Stuart, and I think you shouldn't do that in your opening arguments. It'd be just a lot easier to follow. Now, this particular subject matter I'm really familiar with, so it's not like they were ever discussing anything. I was like, what are you guys even talking about particularly? But if you are new to this, they were just all over the place, all over the place. And good opening arguments are a way to help with that. And it's not the MDD way, but if a moderator on a different channel that decided to do it a different way could try to make them stick to those points and not just let it be a going who knows where. But that's not how modern day debate does it, which is fine. They have their style.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this is, the kind of this, what a moderator can do is kind of go into the place and say, well, why are we doing what, like, we need to stick to this topic. We have this topic. What do you think about these particular elements of this topic? And I think that that would have definitely enhanced and strengthened, the debate. Um, yeah, let's look at a few of the comments that we have in the chat because we always want to do that. That's important. That's the Yerba Mate way. So, uh, is the bald guy on the left Dr. J? If so, how old is this picture?
So the bald guy in the picture is me, and I'm wearing my LeBron James first time with the Cleveland Cavs jersey. And I think that picture was maybe 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago. I probably look thin in that picture because of the angle and the way the jacket is sort of not fully on my neck. So I probably look particularly thin in that picture, but that picture is not that old. That was probably a couple months ago.
Okay. So Tori says hello. Hello, Tori. It's probing time 666, Nathan Oakley's daddy. Hello, at Issa and Dr. J. Sorry, but I only caught the last 20 to 30 minutes of the actual debate. Um, yeah, well, that's fine. We're going to be covering the debate, so no problems. Binge Thinker says hello, and Binge Thinker says thanks. And it's probing time says, "Are you okay there, Binge Thinker? Suddenly you look to be feeling all blue."
I
We
don't know
love that.
why Bidge Thinker's text changed to blue. I'm not sure why, but clever there, Mr. Probing.
Clever. That is
Yeah.
clever. That's my natural color. I'm a Smurf. We love this kind of dialogue.
Oh boy.
Yes. Um, yeah, good to see you all. That's great. And of course, I shouldn't be blue, but I ran over some of those Smurfs and the color came out. Okay, great.
Oh
Yes,
jeez.
very silly. We have some silly conversations, and we have one more about aliases. That's great. So now we're going to go back to we're going to go to the rebuttals. So what did you think about who went first? Was it Dan? Was it Dan's rebuttal or was it Stuart? I think
I think it was Stuart, but
Stuart.
it
Yeah.
it started to really sort of bounce around. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, it did.
so it get because I'm not going to be able to delineate the rebuttals differently than the open discussion. It all sort of started flowing together for me. And just to comment, like, on the Stewart side, he kept bringing up, well, um, atheists can't have ethics, right? The one thing we've talked about 100 times, or at least a few times, right? Atheists can't have ethic. There's no moral foundation, whatever, that there's no moral foundation. And for the topic, this doesn't matter, right? Like, it doesn't matter if atheism is defunct. Christianity was on the defense here, right? Did you think of it that way? I mean, I don't understand. Even if you could tear secular humanism to pieces, um, I don't think that was the prompt. I don't know. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. And I feel that if you are the person against Christianity, it is your job to disprove Christianity. Because really, like, if you're like the Christian, you take the Christian position, you're neutral. You're like, well, I think this is good. I don't see any problem with it. So you've got to disprove why. You have to prove that Christianity is not sound. And I think it's a lot of work to prove that. But I
Well,
think,
he tried to bring up slavery and just morally problematic things, but because I just think he said, well, Christianity is problematic, right? Like, slavery, whatever, and he brought these different things up. But he did definitely go the you need to provide evidence route. And um I don't know. The sort of you just need to prove to me something. It's okay, but it doesn't make for a very interesting debate. You should bring up reasons. If I was going to go on a debate on, like, whether I believed in unicorns, I don't believe in unicorns, and I'm going to go on a debate, and you believe in them. I do think it's worth it for me at least to be able to be like, let me just give you like 4 reasons why I don't believe in unicorns. You know what I mean? Just like something, right? Even though I realize, I shouldn't have to have a ton of evidence for not believing in ghosts or not believing in every single, I don't believe in, every imaginary character anyone's created. But for the sake of the debate, I guess I would agree with you. Just for the sake of the debate, you should be bringing something to try to say, you know, I don't think it makes for a very interesting debate for you to walk up and go, I don't believe in unicorns, prove me wrong. The end.
yeah, I agree. I think it's really kind of crucial that you have some sound argument. And I'm like, if you're going to say that Christianity is unsound, then you have to prove what is sound, what is defensible. See, this is the problem with taking this kind of position. You're saying, okay, there's morally problematic elements in Christianity. Fine. All right, let's steelman that. Let's grant that. What worldview doesn't have that? Like, this is why, like, when I saw the secular humanist debates, what I feel is problematic of secular humanism versus like Christianity or versus Islam is you're choosing a particular element of secular thought, right? And secular life and saying, well, I'm granting that as good. Then you have to give, the kind of the alternative, the same similarity to like a denomination within whatever faith tradition. You can't debate the entire faith tradition against one type of perception within, secular thought. I find that to be very problematic in debates. And
But the trouble with that, I mean, I see what you're saying. Like, it's like I don't want to defend the Catholics or something if I'm not Catholic, but there is a little bit of no true Scotsman issue sometimes, right? Like, if you could just, what if you just get to redefine it constantly to whatever is good, it's hard to argue with. You know what I mean?
that's my problem, because I'm like, what the secular humanists I see in these debates do is they get to argue all the good things about secularism. They don't have to defend Mao Zedong. They don't have to defend Stalin. And I'm like, that's dishonest. Why do you get to be able to get the most highest, most charitable view of your point of view, but you get to pick on all the things that are problematic with the other person? That is really, it's intellectually dishonest, and I really
But
don't like that. Do you know what
but
I
when
mean?
Yeah, I do. But when they say they want to argue, if they say the secular humanist manifesto, if they're willing to just say I wanna go with that, does that not help narrow it down? You can at least argue against the this second. Is it called a manifesto? I forget the secular human, because
Yeah,
that's
it's like
not
a
that
Western
long.
system.
You can read it. It's not hard to digest. That gives you kind of something to argue about, right?
Oh,
Or at least.
I totally get that. I just think it's weird when I see these debates where people are like, I get to argue the most charitable view of my point of view, but then I'm going to just demonize anything from the entire ocean of stuff. Like
Mhm.
like you
Yeah.
said, you brought up like Catholics, right? Like you'd say, I can argue against crusades. So like, I can't argue against Stalin and Mao Zedong. No, 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 because I'm secular humanist. And I'm like, that's like my face. I'm like, really? And I'm like, that's my problem. You're trying to say, look at these problematic elements of Christianity. I'm like, you don't think there are problematic elements with like Stalinism and, you know, Pol Pot, Mao Zedong. You don't think that that is problematic? Well, they're not secular humanists. And I'm like, okay. I just find that to be just so dishonest and
Yeah.
disingenuous.
Well,
You know what I mean?
but to solve it, wouldn't you have to be like, it would be this horrible long definition game, like secular humanism versus, premillennial, pre-trib dispensational Baptist, like, this super long thing. The Christian there's so many types of Christianity. That's the one I know most about. You'd have to spend a crazy amount of time defining what you believe, right? and
I totally get
and
that.
and so the title of, and so that is hard. I mean, so I do find it hard. I do think that it becomes clear when certain debaters don't offer any charity, meaning like they know they pick something bad, the other debater says I don't believe that, and they go, well, too bad, you have to. I mean, they don't say those words, but they treat it like you have to. And I agree that's unfair. Because if you're, if there's so many different versions of Christianity. um you know Now, sometimes, okay, so I agree with you that you should only have to defend the kind of Christianity you believe in. Now, sometimes though, Christians, I mean, I'm gonna pick on us because I know the most about us. We will make some claims like only theists can be like good people. We're the only ones that are moral. If you are going to say that, then you are saying theists. Then you embraced everybody at that point, right? Then you need to actually, say that all of Christianity or whatever, or all of theism, and then if you just say theist, then you got all of Islam and every other religion that you have to defend at that point. Um, so anyway, it's difficult.
I totally agree. I just think like when I debate, like for example, if I represent Islam, I'm like, I look at the things that are problematic with Islam. I'm like, here are things that would be problematic for the modern day, and I grant these things. But like when I see this type of position, like when I was listening to Dan Barker's arguments, he was like, yeah, my thing just all my crap smells good and your crap smells bad. My system just works and it's logical and it's rational and everything's functional. Your system's just non-functional. It doesn't work. And I'm like, you're highly charitable to your position and you're highly uncharitable to the other position. And I'm like, that it lacks credibility. I don't
Mm.
buy that when people do that. I'm like, you have to be able to um have some kind of distance from your own personal bias. And I think that that
Yeah,
didn't work for me, you know.
yeah, I guess it didn't bother me as much. I mean, it sounds like he's written a lot of books about the situation, about his beliefs, and therefore he probably is like articulated it very clearly. I believe these very carefully stated things, and he thinks they're correct. So anyway, we can probably go on to the next thing, but it clearly
Sure.
didn't annoy me quite as much as it annoyed you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think my position is I really like accountability. That's something that I value. So I'm like, you need to be accountable with me. You need credibility with me. And if you lose credibility, that's a problem for me as a debater. And I was just like not like at a certain point I'm like, I'm just not buying this dude. You know, and that was my and you're right. And that's maybe just like my own personal trigger where I'm like, you're not credible, boss. You're just making your stuff sound like it's good, and I don't know if it is. But like thinking, like going on with the rebuttals, I think,
Mhm.
they had it was interesting. It was an interesting back and forth. I did find it strange with Dan, where he was like, "You're doing it ad hominem, moderator. Please come in," and I was like, that's weird. That was something I never I never really heard. You know, like that's rare that I usually hear that debate. So I don't think Dan really has debated on this particular platform.
Right.
So I think that that was something that
Yeah, he's totally
I missed
unused
it.
to the MDD style of like, just whatever. Like the MDD, it's like they want to say nothing. That's the goal. If James says nothing the whole time, I think he feels like he's had a successful debate. What did you think about something that annoyed me,
Sure, tell
that
me.
I've seen happen is when Stuart goes, I know you've been hurt by Christianity. I know in your head better than you do, and this is why you think this. I hate that.
Wow, that was a real jab. He was jabbing hard. He's like, I'm a psychotherapist and
Yes.
I see it. I'm not gonna lie. I kind of agree with Stuart. I think he's right, but I don't think you should do it in the debate. Like I do think I think Dan has some there's some stuff there. I think that there is some stuff, but I definitely it was definitely not the appropriate thing to say, but I think he was doing that for his crowd. He was like, I'm jabbing at this, because like
I
have you seen God's Not Dead? Have you seen that movie?
Yeah, years ago. I haven't seen it recently.
He's looking at Dan as the
Yes,
atheist professor. He's
he is.
making him the atheist professor, and
In his own mind.
he's like, I got the atheist professor here. I
Yep.
got him,
Yep.
lock, stock, and barrel. And I
Absolutely.
um what is his name? Joss Wheaton. That's the character. Joss Wheaton moment. He said, I hate God. That's what the atheist professor says. He's like, how can you hate God if
Mhm.
God isn't real? And I was like, yo, he just did the Joss Wheaton. So I
Yep.
agree. Like from a debate space, yeah, absolutely no. But for
Yeah.
his crowd, I think it was a completely
Oh.
go
Oh,
go.
I'm sure his crowd loved it. As a matter of fact, I think Stewart's crowd probably loved that whole debate. But I think that's completely unfair. And I actually think that many people have left Christianity sad that they had to do it. Sad, disappointed that they had to do it. And
Leo said that.
Christians act like that person doesn't exist, and that is totally incorrect in my opinion. Sure, there are people that have been hurt by Christianity and leave for that reason. That's fine, but sometimes I think Christians, we cope. We're like, well, they must have left because someone was mean to them, because it couldn't have been anything else. You know what I mean? Like that's how we make feel better about ourselves. It was just someone's moral failing, treating someone poorly. Therefore, all of our arguments must be, absolutely perfect. Couldn't be that. I think that does happen.
I totally agree, and I definitely think that was a clickbait thing. I think he totally is going to use that on his channel. He's going to have that little YouTube video where he's going to be like, got the atheist professor. I got the atheist scholar, Dan Barker with his tail behind his, between his legs. He's like, I know you. You've been hurt. And yeah, it's definitely I definitely think the focus should be
because
on the
because
topic.
because Barker could have completely turned it. Dan could have completely turned around and said, "The only reason you believe this is because your dad will hate you if you don't," and he's probably right.
Ooh, that would
That
have
would
been
be
rough.
inappropriate, right? That would not be something you should say, but he could say it. If you want to just be the jerk, I know your head more than you, and I get to just ascribe feelings to you and subscribe things to your head. Dan could have done that, and you shouldn't do that. It's not good, and you can be as mean as you want on that stuff. And I think it's incorrect. You don't get to just say you know what everyone else is thinking.
That's pretty brilliant rebuttal though. Like if you're taking pot shots, that would have been a pretty brilliant.
Oh
That
yeah,
would have been a
absolutely.
brilliant pot shot. That would have been a. I think MDD would have loved that. They would have
Oh,
loved to have that clip. You know.
absolutely. They would absolutely love it. The atheists would have been eating that up. I mean, that they would have been going bonkers happiness on that. This is why I shouldn't debate Issa. I could be I try really hard to be nice, but if I can have the sharp tongue sometimes.
I
And so
think you should do that though. You would be super entertaining. You've got the toolkit. I think you would have been fire. You know. I would have loved to see that. It would have been interesting to see that kind of exchange. It did feel it like I think Stuart really feels comfortable in this space. He's like,
yes.
I'm ready to rumble. I battle people who disagree with me all the time, and I just revel in it. I want that conflict. I want that tension because I, know how to twist it around. And he did. I definitely think I'm not saying it was right or moral, but he definitely knew how to control the
Yeah.
space. And I don't think Dan was really able to handle that.
Absolutely. I thought if you want to talk about who, like, if you didn't knew nothing walking in and you weren't like super, well versed in, maybe how Stewart was not really addressing issues correctly or whatever. Sometimes Stewart seemed like he won, right? That I think that's the impression most people would walk away with. I mean, I thought so anyway.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think in the kind of clash between them, Stuart really because Stuart has a kind of like a wealth of different things that he uses. He uses philosophers. I heard him mention Hume. He uses a lot of these folks to kind of bolster his kind of intellectual clout, which is interesting because it's like if Christians sound like they're intellectually adept, well, isn't it true that Christianity is intellectually protected? I mean, that's the kind of thing that I think he brings that kind of air to his discussion with Christianity. So
I thought a lot of that was quote mining, in my opinion. I don't think he's read those people. I think it was just quote mining. I mean, did you think so or not?
the thing is, it's not about actually being smart. It's about sounding smart. So he did a
Okay,
very
wow,
good
yeah,
job at sounding
yeah,
smart.
yeah.
And that's
There
the
you
whole
go.
point of the debate. The whole point of
Yeah,
the debate isn't if you actually know. Like Daniel Hakikachu does the same thing. If you look at,
yeah.
did he actually read all the Vedas and stuff? No. He
All
quote
right.
mines the stuff and then he says, okay, look how terrible Hinduism is. Look at and the other people are not prepared. But if that's what you do, you shotgun it and you just say
Yeah.
all of this stuff and you learn your talking points and you learn those points really well from whatever your scholar is. That's what they did in God's Not Dead. That's what Joss Wheaton does. He quote mines all the atheist scholars and it's brilliant, and he has this like high tech presentation that no college student would be able to produce at like a freshman student would ever be able to produce. But like it's this. I totally agree. I think that was intentional. So
Yeah.
yeah, we'll read some.
I
Oh yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I think Stewart probably has like 10 quotes memorized that he just brings up every now and then. That would be my guess. I could be wrong about that. Because like when you're a pastor, speaking as one, you're like busy and you're writing sermons and stuff. I'm not reading Hume anymore. You know what I mean? I guess if I just wanted to do it for fun on the side, but you don't do it as a part of your job. So if he has a family or responsibilities outside of work, I maybe he's reading that stuff carefully still, but that's not usually what happens when you become a pastor.
I love that you're exposing Stuart. You're exposing Stuart's thing. If you debated Stuart, Stuart would be in trouble. Stuart would be in trouble. All of his tricks would go out the window. If you came in, you're like, I'm a pastor and I'm aware of all these tricks you're using. You're making sermons all the time. When is your time to read Hume and
Yeah.
represent him
Yes.
correctly?
Tell me more about this Hume guy. What year? When did he live again? Oh, you don't know? Okay. Yeah.
Like you're right. It's like I saw this movie. It had Jesse Eisenberg in it. I forgot what the title of it was, but his dad is a professor, and his parents are getting like a divorce or something. But he doesn't study. He doesn't learn anything. But he listens to his dad like talk about scholarly stuff. So what he does is he quote mines all that stuff, and then he talks to people. And he uses this quote mines to sound like he's smart. And he actually picks up like a female companion doing that. And I'm like, that is something. You don't
Yeah.
actually have to be smart. You just pretend to be, you learn a few words, and I'm going to be honest. I've had certain conversations with, I think, I call them pseudo intellectuals, and they'll be like, I want to tell you about metaphysical, identity. And I'm like, okay, so what does that mean? Like, the thing is, they learn a few terms, but they don't actually know what this stuff means. And they say this stuff because they want to sound smart, but they aren't actually smart,
Yeah.
It's
As
completely
Batman,
performative.
says, "Fake it till you make it." He said, "We got to get better at that. You and I, we gotta
We gotta
get
be fake.
it. We
We
gotta
really
quit
do.
saying I don't know, I haven't read that one, or that's not my area of expertise. We just need to be faking it till we make it. That's what we
100%.
gotta do."
Yeah, and I like to be honest to the sources. Like I do, I think that's what a real intellectual does, and you try to represent them correctly. Like I've had debates about religion, and the person has no scholarship in religion. Like they've never studied religion, and then they like go into pseudo intellectualism, and I'm like, but you don't actually know this topic. Like you're talking about Buddhism, but you haven't even studied Buddhism. You can't even pronounce the words correctly. I'm like, it's completely fraudulent. It's a completely fraudulent narrative. It's unbelievable.
Mhm.
We'll read some of our comments because we want to make sure that the community is involved. Let's see. Where are we? Where did we start off? Okay. Who's Papa Smurf? We have a lot of silly comments here. um, hey binge, Zoomy Tomato. Okay, that's an interesting name. Who doesn't want to believe in unicorns? They are the most majestic of creatures. This is so silly. We've got a lot of silly comments here. Well, thank you. We love that people are connected. We've got Batman here. Batman, you should come on the stage too. We'd love to hear your comments. I would love to hear what you have to say about what you think about this. Haman says howdy to everyone. We love that there's lots of love in the chat. Look at all this love in the chat. This is great. Oh, wow. Batman is roasting.
Wow.
That's a
Throwing
roast.
shade.
That's a
Throwing
roast.
shade. Whoa. I mean, I would
Wow.
say that he's complimenting flat earthers, but I know that's not the case.
No. I actually kind of agree. I was like, where are your presentations?
Yeah.
Where are your arguments that you're going to be developing? It's like an essay. You write like your guiding paragraph and then you expound in your body. That was not done, and I think that really hurt the debate.
Even
Okay.
if you just mentally scratched out an outline and did it, there was clearly no outline being followed.
There was not.
On those.
No. So our dear brother Max is here. He says, I have never been hurt by Christianity. And people have said that to me. Yeah, I do think it's such a dumb argument. Like, yeah, you're doing it because you're trying to get that clip. It's clickbait, I'm betting that James is going to use that. He's going to put that little clip in his shorts,
Yeah.
That's going to be funny. Very funny. But I think it draws the crowd in. That's the kind of stuff people want to see. What do they call it? See the blood, like the were the gladiators, the
Oh yeah,
gladiator sport.
absolutely. That's what people come to see. Yeah, a lot of
And
people
Stuart
enjoy
was
that.
really good at it. He is a gladiator. He's a Christian gladiator. He's going in and he's going for blood,
Yeah,
And I think
he's really good at seeming super nice. And oh, I'm just so nice. I don't want to say anything bad. And then it's like, oh, what happened to you? You've been hurt. You clearly are totally. I mean, basically say you're totally irrational and can't think straight at all because you've been hurt. It's like, wait a second. That was a very nice seeming way to tell the guy he didn't know his own feelings and was an irrational and couldn't think straight. Like, that was a very sweet sounding way to basically get to a major insult.
he did a lot of insults in that. He threw a lot of barbs. He's like, "You've been a pastor of 3 churches and you know nothing about Christianity?"
Yeah.
Like,
You
really?
don't even
I
know
was
the
like, "What?"
main point of Christianity. It's like, oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah, Stuart was going for blood, and I think he succeeded. I think
He did.
way people are going to view it, Stuart won the debate because I'm going to be honest. I hate to say this, but I felt Dan was crying a lot. He was like, "Moderator, where are you?" He felt like a poor deer in headlights, and I was like, "Oh, I feel bad for you, Dan. Oh man,
Yeah.
you were not prepared for Stuart. You were not prepared for this like tour de force." And throwing punches. He just threw punches every time he could. Like, especially at the end. Oh my gosh. He threw so many punches at Dan that I don't think Dan even saw half of them, It was like Dragon Ball Z. Like, he threw this flurry of punches, and you're like, you can't see any of them. But you see the wounds. Yeah, I think I felt bad for Dan. We'll talk about that in the conclusions, but Specs is here. Don't know about that movie, but Gods Must Be Crazy. That is a good movie. Oh, Batman's here. We're
Yeah,
gonna add him to the
you
stage.
guys need to be watching God's Not Dead just for your own personal edification. I'm sure
Oh,
it's
you
real
have to see it.
cheap rental somewhere.
There are 4 of them. I've seen all of them.
I didn't get. I think I got through 2 maybe. You seem to remember movies better than me. I don't see. I have this strong a memory of these movies that I've seen.
Well, I think because they had a major impact on me. Do you know how I actually saw the God's Not Dead movies? I went to visit a church across the street from me, and they said, "We're doing a free film viewing." And I said, "Okay, I'll come." And I had no idea that I was going into the Lion's Den. They were like, "These Christians are like, we're going to get a new disciple today."
Yes.
That was their goal. I was like, "Oh, I'm going to a movie," and they have popcorn. Oh, and then I learned about Ray Comfort. I didn't know who Ray Comfort was. Then I heard this guy, "Have you lied before? Have you stolen before?" And I was like, "What is this?" Like, all of these things, it was like a phenomenon because Ray Comfort's lecture came on first. Then there was the God's Not Dead. And I was kind of like completely disoriented after that experience.
Yeah.
And they're like, let's see, we have God's Not Dead too, with Clarissa Explains It All. From the 90s, there was Sabrina the Teenage Witch. She's in the second movie of God's Not Dead, where she's a teacher who, has been, she just talked about Jesus in the class. You need to get out and you need to be sued because you can't talk about Jesus in the class.
Yeah.
I was like, it was phenomenal. That church,
while you were watching that movie, most people were not watching that. They were watching you to see if they were going to get you converted during that thing.
oh,
I'm
I think they
guessing.
were totally getting me. They were like, this.
Yep.
And they did that too because then they did a preaching afterwards and like, have any of you have a sin to confess? Do you want to come up on the stage? And I'm just like,
is your name Issa by any chance?
They wanted me to come up there and they wanted me to be like, come to Jesus now. And I was like, it was like really, I'm like, do people want to do that? I'm like, this is extremely embarrassing to go in front of a bunch of people and do this. But that was their goal. Their goal was totally to get me to go up there and, give it, confess and get a testimony, baptism. It was like, we're just going to get you all the way. We're going to get you all the way there. And I thought it was, that church was an experience. It was like an evangelical, maybe Baptist-ish type of church, but it was interesting too. And I met like ex-Muslims there who were like, we believe in Jesus now. Islam is from the pits of hell. It's a garbage. Like, the guy was from Iraq and he came up and he's like, I'm free. My wife is free. We're all free from this darkness. It's like, wow. It was Man, I should have it. I should stream about going to that church. It was, and I went
Yeah.
many times too. I've been to that church many times, but it was a story. But we'll go through the chats and then we're gonna have Batman talk. Here's Batman's chat. Okay, we're just gonna go through these. I think it's to do with the lack of academics to study toward the Bible and religion as a whole. That's a problem I see. Okay, with Protestantism, yeah, we'll hear about that. Just want to make sure everybody's represented here. Wow, Matthew Hakim gets a little spot here. Um, wow, we're getting through all of it. And flirfs. I mean, flirfs are really a part of the conversation. Let's see. Any interesting points here? Cat in the chat. Okay, cute. All right, so Batman, you're up. We'd like to hear about what your thoughts are on the openings and what did we cover? Openings,
And rebuttals.
overview, openings, rebuttals, and then we're gonna go to QA after that.
I mean, really, the entire debate was supposed to be about an intellectual defense and attack, but there wasn't really much intellectual about it. They were just kind of mudslinging. Am I wrong? Like, it didn't really feel like a proper debate. It was just two people really just dialoguing back and forth. That's why I even said too, flat earthers do a better job when it comes to like prepping before a debate like this too, just because they actually bring something to the table. Even
Sometimes
if
they
it's not
don't,
good
but
stuff,
they
but you get what I mean.
yeah, sometimes they don't, but yeah, sometimes they do. I mean, complete lack of proper openings to me just made this go completely astray because and I think Stuart was really good at changing the subject when he wanted to, right? And because of that, because Dan didn't really have any points to get back to, like, hey, I made this point in my opening, we need to address it. He let it just go all over the place. So I thought it was a bit of a rambling mess. I agree.
That's why I brought up too in my super chat as well, saying that for people that actually want to see an intellectual defense of Christianity, they should start reading up on the Summa Theologica by St. Thomas Aquinas. Like that's medieval apologetics. It's multiple volumes. Like if I can't remember if it was 5 or 8, something like that. I'm blanking on that at the moment, but there wasn't really an intellectual case brought up for Christianity. A lot of it just seemed more like misrepresentation and character assassination.
And the whole like a lot of people believe it argument. I mean, I, I a Christian cannot use that argument because if you say so, if no one else believed, would you stay true? What is a Christian going to say? Of course, I would stay
Right.
true, even if it knows what else believe. So saying a lot of people believe it doesn't work because you would still believe it even if a lot of people didn't believe it. And Stuart did use that in his opening argument. I thought this is completely irrelevant. Like, you would not accept this evidence if it were switched the other way. You would completely reject this evidence.
Right. There's a lot of things that the majority of people believe, but just because they believe it doesn't mean that they believe it makes it true. And that is a terrible argument because we can even bring that up to even colloquial stuff outside of religion or whatever. And it still ends up being the same rule.
I agree. How
Yeah.
did you think another thing that I thought was that Dan did poorly was I have not seen an atheist yet, and maybe I'm forgetting, but atheists really struggle with the moral relativism argument, right? Stuart really wanted to bring it there. I think he brought it there on purpose, even though I don't know if it really had anything to do with the prompt, just because he felt strong there. And I thought Dan really struggled with it. I mean, are there atheists out there that don't struggle with it? I mean, I know for atheists, they think the argument's clear and that Dan and people that like him are right. They can see the arguments, so they see that it's correct. It just to me optically, the Christians almost always win in that arena. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's just what it seems like often happens.
I think also too because with Christians, unlike with I mean, to put it fair, with theists over the atheists, is that there's really a set of dogmas. So even when it comes to atheists, their moralities really do tend to be all over the place. And sometimes they don't understand like how much of their morality or their system in particular really does come from a Christian foundation. In a similar way to where in other areas their moral foundations are built upon typically, yeah, within like tradition and religion. Even if the particular person isn't like a believer anymore, or there's groups of people even in that way, there's still a set foundation that they got from people long before them. And I
Yeah, I
think
mean,
that's also, yeah,
I follow that, but like if the atheist gets to say do no harm, that is not a exclusively Christian idea, right?
right.
Surely, lots of other cultures agree that not harming people is a good idea for the most part. Like this
But
does not seem
we do have a different understanding though of like how far is too far when it comes to even harm.
yes, but the Christians don't agree. We don't agree with each other at all. And to me, that's what the atheist has to point out. And I see no atheist ever being able to adeptly do this, right? Like if you want to
That's
say,
true.
oh well, morality's built on a Christian foundation, that's fine. But then you go they have to try to point out the Christian foundation's, just as subjective as the atheist. They just can't do it, or they can't do it effectively. They can't do it well.
I think probably some of that too also end up depending on how far they want to go back through history in that setup as well. So even especially too when it does come to Christian morals, you're not just going into even the beginnings of Christianity, but you're also diving in further too into Judaism and even the morals of the ancient Israelite people and so forth. So I think even then that's kind of where it ends up being like too much effort, probably because they don't really care that much, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe so. I just think that the atheist can't let the Christian get away with all of your beliefs that everyone likes actually are my beliefs that you borrowed. I just think the Christians tend to run circles around them. I really do. And the atheists just have to figure out a way to I mean, I follow the atheist argument just fine. But they just don't articulate it well at all. You know what I mean? In the same
Yeah.
way that I think the evolutionist doesn't often struggle to articulate the idea of like, well, how come the Earth was created perfectly this way? It's like no, the atheist or the evolutionist says this was one of an almost infinite ways it could have been done. This just happens to be one of them. It's just totally random. It wasn't guided. It didn't, and the atheist has often struggled, or the evolutionist, excuse me, often struggles to make that argument well, arguing against Christians. You know what I mean? I think that's
Hmm.
another hard one to make. And I just think these are two areas in which I see the evolutionists struggle with that argument. And then the atheist struggling with the whole, listen, I do make up my morals. I'm just deciding no harm is what I want to do. And I think that's what we should all agree to do. And I think that's a good idea. The Christian goes, oh, you're just making this up. The atheist has to be able to coherently say, you make it up too. And the atheists struggle with that, in my opinion, big time.
I'm not sure about that one actually.
That the Christians make it up.
Yeah, I'm not sure to do how to do
They
that one with Christians make it up. If you
they
could
all
elaborate
you
on
got.
that one.
So what you have to do is say, is slavery wrong? Has it always been wrong in Christianity? No. Was it used to be almost universally accepted? Yes. Then Christians decided it wasn't okay, right? Yes. Now it's almost universally condemned, right? Yes. You guys are just changing the rules, just like we do. You're just changing the rules. And so can women work, you can go to women examples or whatever, but you have to try to be able to demonstrate that Christianity has changed the rules over time. And then you go, you guys change the rules and we change the rules too. And the fact that you have a book doesn't help you very much. That to me, that's the argument the atheist has to make.
Do you mind if I play with that as like a counter argument?
Sure.
I suppose the problem with that though too is like even especially too like when Constantine legalized Christianity throughout the Roman Empire, it didn't just mean all of a sudden that all Christian morals are accepted worldwide, even um even after the European wars of religion, when you had the Protestant Reformation, you have the splitting of ideas, especially morals, throughout, which you would end up calling there the kingdom of God in that respect. Um, it's kind of hard to, I mean, I did just kind of pinpoint it even in that way, but in that certain respect too is where these different morals do end up like arising because of men rather than the religion itself. Just because, yeah,
The
if you get
divine
what I'm
right of
saying on that
kings.
one.
Yeah, the divine right of kings. At some point, most everybody believed the divine right of kings. How many Christians today believe in the divine right of kings? Almost none. So you have to be able to articulate that weight that in a way as an atheist, in my opinion, and say, you guys are making this up too. And
Well, I
that
mean, divine right of kings, is that really a moral issue?
so should you obey the king?
Yeah.
Why? So they would say, God tells us in the Bible that there's a king and that God makes a king and we should have kings and the kings have these certain rights. And so democracy wouldn't be okay in the divine right of kings, right? That wouldn't be all right. And if you try to get rid of the king and have democracy instead, you'd be disobeying the Bible.
I'm not sure where you're getting that bit from, though. Because especially if we're talking about the time that the New Testament was written, about the first century, we aren't talking about any societies that did particularly have like
No, but
democracies in that way. Even Greece isn't close to the democracy we have
but
now.
at some point they believe the Christianity believed in the divine right of kings. Yeah, they probably didn't believe it in Paul's time, but they did believe it at some other point. And then they don't believe it anymore. And then now Christians don't believe it now. There's no consistency there, right? Like you're saying, you're making it up as you go along.
But I'm not sure if that's a morality discussion or if that's more of a political discussion.
If you're disobeying the king, you're going against God, and you're
Okay,
disobeying the God, the divine right of kings. Of course,
and
it's
that
a
and
moral
that
issue.
even and that even depends too on if the king does tell you to renounce your faith, then you say no, which is kind of basically some of where the limit is,
Yeah,
even
of course,
really
there
on
would
that
be a
one.
limit to the divine right of kings, obviously,
Right.
but
But
there.
in terms of like doing what the king says though, is yeah, that is like pretty much taught. But just because there are people who do end up opposing that or whatever the like, or because there are libertarians, they are really going off of what they invented, not really of what's long been taught in that way. And I guess yeah, you're saying like, because it's written in like the Bible and stuff like that. But yeah,
Well,
and it does go back further, but
and
it yeah.
the divine right of kings is kind of specific. It's not just what Christians say today, because Christians say today, like, obey those who rule over you to a point, right? Like, divine right of kings is like more specific than that. It's not just obey the leader. It's like we should have a king, not a president, a king, you know? And so people don't believe in the divine right of kings today. Christians still would believe that we should obey those who rule over you, Romans 13, so on and so forth. Most Protestants would still, believe in obeying authority, but they reject the divine right of kings now.
In terms of like if God appointed them, right? In that sort of respect as well. Like how it says, like I believe it's Romans 13, that all kings, all leaders are basically appointed by God.
Well, I mean, theologically, everyone still agrees that God, um, God is the ruler of everything, and therefore no one's a king unless God, decided they were okay. Um, but that isn't a question. The divine right of kings is like God puts kings of kingdoms, and He puts them there, and we should all obey the king. I should get a good definition of the divine right of kings for you.
And that's the thing I'm also kind of confused on too, is I don't know how that doesn't extend to other forms of government, even in regards to like whether it be a constitution of republic or a democracy type of thing.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the divine right of kings, God chooses the king, okay, the king of the country. This is not like how Protestants we would say it today, where like God's technically in control of everything. So yes, God put Biden in, God put Trump in, God put
Right.
Clinton in, God put them all. It's like no, this specific person God wanted, the monarch then is only answerable to God, They're not responsible to listen to citizens. There's no parliament. There's nothing. It's the king. God made the king, and everybody needs to obey the king. If you don't obey the king, you're disobeying God, and therefore having voting or having a parliament or anything like that is wrong. It's sinful, and there was usually a hereditary element to that, a royal succession where you are supposed to go along bloodlines. Christianity universally rejects this idea now, but it wasn't there at the beginning. It's not here now, but like in the middle, that was a thing that a lot of Christians believed. But the rules changed.
I'm trying to remember too. Is that like now that I'm thinking about it too, isn't that kind of the same thing Adolphus Augustus basically went by as well? With that sort of like divine right of kings.
I can't remember if those are connected together or not.
He was a Protestant king that ended up doing that as well during the European wars of religion.
Yeah, I mean all those kings during the Middle Ages time-ish. I mean, I'm massively oversimplifying, but the divine right of kings was strong during that period of time. So anyway, just to go back to my normal point, you can the atheists in these kind of debates, when the Christian wants to bring it to we have a universal set of rules that changes and you don't, the atheist has to be able to articulate, well, no, Christians are changing the rules all the time. And it's not going to be hard to believe that in 50 years, no Christians will condemn homosexuality anymore. And at some point, most Christians thought women shouldn't go to work, and now they think it's okay. And you could just come up with a list of different things that Christianity has massively changed their opinion on over the years and say, you guys make it up as you go along. I think that's what the atheist needs to do. And I just don't see any of them doing that effectively.
I want to say, sorry.
More of a I was just going to say, like, real quickly, and I apologize not to. Isn't that more of a cultural argument than more of a religious, like, discussion on that one, though? Because the thing with Christianity is Christianity as a religion doesn't teach, like, pro or against, like, women working in the workforce.
It did,
like working
absolutely.
In the factories during World War
II. It doesn't now, but it did at some point.
Like as a religion in teaching that.
So when you say, like, does Christianity say that's lying wrong? Yes, then they've always said that. Obviously there's exceptions, but like in general, has Christianity always said that's lying wrong? Yes. Has Christianity always said that women shouldn't work? At one point they said they shouldn't work, and now they say it's okay. They changed the rules.
I'm not sure about engaging in it, and I think that might be why is because that does end up being more of a cultural discussion rather than like a cultural.
It's a sin if the woman goes to work. They would say it was a sin.
Wait, who said that?
Christianity used to not have wouldn't.
No. Well, so here let me ask, like, specifically.
Christianity wouldn't allow women to own property, and they would argue it from the Bible, which would be super hard to do.
Let me ask in this sort of way though too. Are we talking about Catholics? Are we talking about Lutherans, Anglicans? Are we talking about Baptists?
So the
Calvinists,
the trick you have is if you're going to claim that people that follow the Bible have a standard that doesn't change, that's what the atheist needs to prove that that's not true. Because every denomination, almost, there's exceptions, claims they follow the Bible completely. And you go, listen, they're all claiming they follow the Bible completely, yet they all have a different whole set of rules. So therefore, your argument that the fact that you have the Bible and now you have an unchanging set of rules that never changes isn't correct. It does change. Let me give you an example of how it changed. Because you could give examples within denominations. You don't even have, you could say, look, the Catholic Church, these are the times they've changed the rules. Here's the Baptists. They started out as Baptists and then they changed their rules. And you could, if you wanted to take the time, you could go through each and every single denomination and demonstrate when they have changed the rules within their denomination.
So I wanted to chip in something here too, which I think is really amazing. We got to give Dr. J some props here. Dr. J is a much better defense attorney for the, a better representation for the atheist side than we saw from the atheist. He would have done a much better cross-examination, because the thing is, I'm not trying to hate on Dan Barker, but I just don't think he is equipped in the apologetic side of this. He does not know how to exploit the weaknesses of his opponent's argument. And, Dr. J's is a pastor. He's intimately involved in this. And he loves debates. He understands debates. And I don't think, honestly, from what I saw, I think maybe Dan is from a different era of debating, from whatever 70s or 80s or whatever, and that's a different era, right? You need to have a different kind of set of arguments that are compelling, and you have to exploit the weaknesses of your argument, of your opponent. And I think really that to target Stuart, you would have to use Dr. J's line of reasoning. That's how you would be efficient and effective. And Dan just didn't do it. So at the end of the day, I don't think really Dan, took away from, didn't really accomplish his mission. But
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to ask. So Batman, we want to make sure that you get your analysis on. So you gave the overview. What did you think about the opening arguments?
I didn't like either one's opening argument. I'm going to be honest. It was, yeah.
So you agree with us? Yeah.
Yeah. I from the beginning to the end, I didn't like it. Just in general. That
Cool.
neither one gained a point. It just, yeah, it was almost like it didn't really even need to happen.
Yeah, I agree with you on this, Batman. I mean, even though they're actually both pretty good at talking, they're actually both fairly articulate. It's not like we brought someone on that couldn't speak well, but I agree. It felt like it didn't go anywhere. I did not think it ended up being a very good debate.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was cool. What do you think about the rebuttals? What did you feel that I know you kind of gave a glimpse, but do you feel that either of them actually was able to kind of get points at all on the other side, or not really?
No. Like I was kind of even saying before too, was sort of like, I think that, and I did enjoy that before trying to get signed into the Streamlabs and whatever too. I got to laugh when you guys were responding to that other comment that I made, but I I think especially too was that lack of academic study within both like the Bible, within Christianity too, and it ends up hurting Protestants. And because if he was going to end up showing up like that to even some Catholic apologists that I'm familiar with, he would have been completely destroyed. I even think too he did a debate with Trent Horn, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and if he basically was that prepped to go up in a debate against Trent Horn, it would have been a slaughter. If he, it's yeah, like I brought up before, was just if they didn't really bring anything to the table, so that's why I end up saying even flat earthers, basically the debate about flat earth has interlocutors who are more prepped than they were.
Yeah, I think that those are all valid points. It's there was definitely kind of a lack, and I think the problem was maybe too much confidence. You need to come in and be like, okay, yeah, maybe I know my subject material really well, but I need to prepare and make sure that I have really good arguments to engage. I definitely think that people at the end of the day are going to think that Stuart won. I think that he kind of came. If you're looking for debates as a blood sport, I think Stuart, through sheer charisma and his kind of talking points, kind of shined with those points. But we'll talk about that towards the end. So let's see. We talked about rebuttal. What did you think about the Q&A? Oh no, are we going to, let's see, did we mention, oh no, we're gonna, once Dr. J gets back, we'll do that. Let's see, what else is there? What did you think about that particular point Dr. J brought up about the, I know what's in you, you have hurt.
That never do that. Never do that. Even if it's, because that's the thing is, even if it, and speaking to as somebody who was born and grew up Catholic, fell away from the faith into new atheism for 14 years or 18 years, something like that, and then basically decided to give Christianity a fair shake. Sure, there are people that may end up having that kind of history where they were hurt, but that doesn't mean you even say something like that in a discussion. All that's really doing is mudslinging. It's just basically trying to start fires. It's never something you should actually try using against a person when engaging in apologetics or even in a debate, because it just makes you look bad. It doesn't matter. The only people who are going to kind of enjoy that thing are the people who enjoy flame wars.
Yeah, I I agree. But I think that is a part of what we see in the dynamic is there is this kind of looking for flame wars. Like I've been on TikTok debates, and that's kind of what they do. They like to get their clips. They want to cut their
Yeah.
clips out, and they're like, "I got them." And like you look at some of the what do they call them, thumb tags for YouTube videos, and I actually don't click on them because they do it. They're like, "Look at this person; he was obliterated," and I'm like, "Okay, not
Yeah.
interested. I'm gonna scroll past that video because like I've seen a few of them and nothing happens even in the video. There's no destroying or anything. It's ridiculous. And I'm like, it just seems like it's like a rage bait. And yeah, it's not impressive for folks looking for intellectual truths and realities. It's just unappealing. Um
Yeah, because
yes.
like what you guys brought up too, and I'm glad you both brought it up as well, just because it is a really, yeah, it's certainly not like the kind of thing you would even want to say to a person, even if that's the reason that, even if they're actually hitting the nail on the head, it's not going to have the reaction of like, oh, well, I guess you're right. That means I'm just going to start changing my ways now and have a different perception and be a little more open-minded. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't even work like that with the people who actually know the person that way. And even in bottom line on that one too, it's not actually like, to kind of go with the theme, it's not making an intellectual defense for Christianity. Oh, you're just hurt by God, the God that you don't even believe in. That's why you're an atheist or something. Just don't. There's a lot of different ways that you can try and engage in intellectual discussion or debate, which is why even I made my first super chat about St. Thomas Aquinas. He literally could have opened, if he went into that debate with the 5 ways, the 5 proofs of God, he would have been infinitely more prepared than he was when he actually went in.
Exactly. Exactly. So let's go to the next section of our conversation, which is Q&A. So we'll start off with Dr. J. What did you think about the Q&A?
Um, I didn't pay as much attention as I should have to the Q&A probably. It was okay. They kind of argue back and forth in that time. I think Stuart got a little more, kept the fire going on there. So I actually often do like the Q&A. Sometimes the super chats people bring in are particularly good and clever, but I think I went up and grabbed food during that time, so my focus wasn't as sharp as it should have been.
Okay, cool. What about you, Batman? You were a part of the Q&A, so what did you think?
um, the for my second super chat that I posted in there, I didn't really get to write as much, I guess, to kind of explain what the problem with Dan's particular argument was from the Psalms, where verse 9 basically says, oh, like, blessed is he who likes smashes the heads of babies on rocks and kills them or whatever. He's like, that's supposed to be a good thing. That's supposed to be blessed. Like that's not what it actually says though, which is why I brought up the previous verse. This is the author basically telling you like he's pissed. And it's not God talking either, which was something that Stuart had actually pointed out, but kind of got tossed to the side. Was this wasn't God saying, smash their babies' heads or whatever. It was because the I'm spacing out the name, I apologize. The Babylonians had essentially done the same exact things to the children of the Jews. And so basically what the dude is calling for, the author of Psalms, and I think that was, yeah, Jeremiah was basically saying like, was calling for an act of vengeance. But it wasn't something that was like even supposed to be of like, morally acceptable. It's, you know, done to what you've done to us should be done unto you as well. that and the fact that he ignored that point, I wasn't particularly too happy with. But when I did ask him, because if it's about not doing harm, since abortion causes harm, then we should stop abortion. Now I'm paraphrasing what I said on that one as well, but he, yeah, did essentially go into that particular discussion where, yeah, abortion's not really like causing harm, and then provide like the anecdotal like examples or whatever. And yeah, I wasn't particularly accepting of his response to that either. The other forms of the super chats, though, I didn't really get to pay attention to too much, just because I had to get focus on moderating. So
On the abortion one that I did when they were talking about that, I thought he did a poor job on that too. I think what he was supposed to just say there was, I don't think an unborn baby is a baby, and therefore you cannot do harm to a not baby.
I actually expected
That's
that.
it. I've assumed that's what he would say, and that's all there is to it, right? Like you can't harm something that's not a person, and there you go. And you might, the questioner might think it's a person. I don't think it's a person. The end of the discussion. I thought that's what he's gonna say. Yeah, like sounds like he thought the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought he was going to say the same exact thing, and then he just focused on, the women. Like that one story he brought up was like a particular mother of three or whatever, and just talking about like, oh, I can't have another child, this or that or whatever. It's like, okay, not typically where the discussion of abortion is really focused on, but I mean, that's also disregarding to the after effects of getting the abortion as well, which wasn't brought up, but that's causing harm as well. Process isn't exactly something that's harmless, even from just the mother's perspective on that one too. But yeah,
So I'll share my thoughts. So I think the authors of the Psalms is King David, and there's like other contributors. I think that's what you have: Asaph and sons of Korach and Moses and Solomon. There's several of people who've written the Psalms, so it's like a compilation of different authors, but primarily I think it's King David. So that's interesting because you can tell that's a period of turmoil for sure for the Israelite people. So I think being honest to the text, being contextual, these are really important things. And they just, I'm going to tell you, I was really not impressed by Dan. I was thinking, I looked up Dan during the thing and I'm like, he looks like he's the superstar that everyone talks about. And I'm like, this is not impressive, like at all. And I asked my question, I'm like, if you think Christianity is this, is the space that's
that's right.
indefensible, I said, then how are all these Ivy League schools, sponsored by Puritan Christians? I'm like, that's something. He's like, well, they just left away from that. And I'm like, they still have like Yale has a huge theological, it's like one of the highest level seminarian type programs there. Like that's people, like they have very high religion degrees from these places. And I'm like, I trying to divorce them from their theological roots and trying to remove, Christianity from these spaces, I think is kind of problematic. And he did concede someone. He's like, yeah, it's someone's good. Then I'm like, so where is it indefensible? Like, that's the point. Your argument is you have to prove that Christianity is intellectually indefensible. And I'm like, you need to have it. That's why you needed this opening to outline that. And he just didn't do it. He just said, oh, there's some bad things here. And I'm like, yeah, I can give apologetics of why those things are there. That's not impressive, And I really think it was up to Dan to really kind of push that home. I felt that Stuart was just kind of coasting. He was like, okay, I don't really have to do too much here.
Yeah.
And that was my feeling of seeing this. He was like, what do I need to say? He didn't actually really refute that Christianity is false. He didn't refute that Christianity is intellectually indefensible. I mean, the problem is with this is, like you mentioned, Thomas Aquinas, right? St. Thomas
Right.
Aquinas. You have all of these corpuses of intellectual Christian thinkers. You have to be able to refute these thinkers. You have to refute, like, centuries
Augustine,
of
too,
knowledge. Centuries of knowledge. You've got to refute it. And just saying, yeah, there's some bad stuff in the Tanakh. I'm like, I mean, is that really what you're going to do? Is that your argument? I mean, is that supposed to be compelling? I'm like, to me, I was like, I am not compelled. I am not persuaded. I see so much intellectual pursuits within um within the Christian community, Jewish community, like the Judeo-Christian stuff. Like I'm like, you have a lot of work that you need to do to prove that this is false. And I think if he took Dr. J's strategy, he would have been a lot more compelling and a lot more persuasive. But he didn't. He just was like, yeah, there's some bad things here. And then like in the Q&A, that's kind of what I felt. There wasn't much for Stuart, so Stuart didn't really respond too much on that. It was mostly towards him. And I think justifiably so, because I'm like, it is your job to prove that Christianity is false and to prove that it's intellectually indefensible. And I didn't see it. So, yeah, I was disappointed. That's my feeling about the Q&A.
Yeah, I agree with you too. It doesn't really feel like he went kind of like I brought up too. It was like he didn't really come into it prepared, and I don't think he really planned to. I think he was just coming at it from an argument of emotion, which I suppose too is sort of like, it's not to say it in the way of like God hurts you or anything like that. It's just basically walking in with biases, I guess, to be more articulate.
Yeah, that's fair. When I saw the Q&A, I was just like, I felt the questions were good, but I just felt like we need to get this shift in, like, I just don't think we got the debate that we were looking for. We were looking for, defenses for why Christianity is intellectually defensible, and we're looking for why it is not intellectually defensible. And I think that we kind of lost out on that. And this is, again, for basic debate 101, have a presentation, have a presentation, have a presentation, have your notes. Like, people critiqued me in my debates, right? Because I have my Prezi presentation and they're like, he's using PowerPoint. I'm like, first of all, it's not PowerPoint, so you got that wrong. And they were critiquing my thing, and I'm like, there's a reason why I'm using it, because that's the whole thing that I springboard the debate on. If I don't have that and I just talk, I could talk with no notes. I mean, with notes, sure, that would work too, but I don't think that's as visually stimulating. So why would I do that? But it's a possibility I could do that. But I'm like, you need a presentation to really showcase what you're doing. And they both just didn't have that. And that was difficult. So the Q&A, there were some interesting highlights, but definitely needed some supports. So we're going to read some of the comments. We want to make sure that everybody's represented here. Let's see. Okay. We have that. We have you. That's funny. Wow, Witsit came in. Mentioning of Witsit came in the chat. How do we know that it's really
that was
Max
probably
and
because
not
of like
Cat?
pretending to be smart without actually being smart.
That is funny. Who clearly is the boss. Okay, that's silly. We got a lot of silly comments here. That would be kind of cool to see on Modern Day Debate, is get some of the comments that may not be paid for to be shown, but it's just still be too many. But it would be interesting to see if some of these kind of witty comments, not the comments that you and I have to like moderate. They have some crazy comments in there too. Like they say some crazy stuff.
Absolutely. Like I do engage as well in the chat as well. Sometimes it's, just to actually have like a discussion as well. Sometimes it's, telling people, try to make sure you're addressing the arguments rather than attacking the persons, and, no insults type of thing. So that ends up being the problem for me with a lot of the debates, just because I'm eyeballing everything. So that's why I don't really retain too much. I can only retain like certain like specifics where I'm actually allowed that breathing room. But yeah, even as like a general sort of like summary of just, yeah, what it all was, not impressed on both sides. Like even like when you brought up like the you like what was it, Yell was brought up, and I was like, yeah, like even when it came to Christianity started orphanages in Europe that weren't seen before. hospitals they started up, universities were even started by Catholics and stuff like that. All three of those were brought up by the Catholic Church from the beginning as well. So even like from an intellectual like kind of standpoint, I don't know if there's a way to even kind of like address where the problem is with that. But then I guess yeah. I apologize.
No, you're good. I just think I actually agree that, I mean, how do you deal with all of these, um, monuments that you see in Christianity? You have to have a better tactic. And this is why I really appreciate Dr. J, because he's very good at giving the alternative argument. He could represent the atheist better than the atheist can. I
Yeah.
really think Dr. J would be an amazing atheist debater. Just listening to him, I think he has like the crisp arguments, and I think they, Dan Barker has a few things to learn from Dr. J. That's what I would say.
Well, when you know your own side well, you should know how to fight against it, right? Like if you know what you think, you should be able to know both sides,
Yeah.
the best you can.
And I really felt that Dan Barker really doesn't know his own side very well. It's just like it's kind of murky and muddy, and he's like, "Yeah, I have ethics," and I'm like, "Okay, so what? How do you universalize it for your point of view?" Well, it's my ethics. I'm like, "Okay, that's cool," but I mean, like, I could argue that for anything. Anybody can argue from their own personal ethics.
He,
So
he wrote a book on it, so I'm guessing he does have a way he thinks about it, but he didn't show well in this debate. You know what I mean? If you read, you might read his book and think, "Oh no, he explains this all fine," but in the verbal back and forth of the debate, it didn't come out well.
I agree. And I think you really had to focus on the argument. They needed to do that. And what I do, like if you ever watch my debates, every time I do it, I try to define the terms I'm going to look into. I said, this is what this term means. If I say, hey, um, Islam is not violent, let's say that's the topic, right? I then define, what does Islam mean? What does violence mean? How do I view this relationship between Islam and violence? And then I move from there. But if I don't do that, then I don't really have any place to launch off of. You know what I mean? I'm just like, well, okay, I'm just talking. You need to have an outline. You need to define terms. You need to create a common ground with your opponent. So your opponent and you agree on the same kind of, on certain foundational ground, and that's how you can challenge each other. If you say, hey, we don't have any common ground, then it's an apple and an orange debating.
Right. And I've seen that too. I've been there plenty of times, even as a Catholic, going up against Protestants, where to bring up like one particular topic as well as the veneration of Mary, prayers to the saints. So even with that one, I have to go through like from, essentially hand holding from beginning to end, just kind of like what you brought up, where it's like, okay, what do we mean by prayer? What is prayer? What do we mean by worship? What is worship? What is veneration? Okay, now that we have like those bottom lines like figured out, is prayer only to God? Is this, this and that? Like you literally do have to go through and break it down just so that way there is no wiggle room for uh kind of like misinterpretation on that front.
All right, so we're going to go to our last section, and then we're going to talk about, we have technically two sections, but one is very short. So we're going to do this section, and then we're going to go to our last section. So what do we think about this? Who won the debate? And it doesn't have to be anyone. You could say no one won. But what did you feel? If you chose a side or you don't choose a side, what do you think? And we'll go in the inverse. We'll start with Batman, then go to Dr. J.
Neither.
Okay, quick and easy. What about you, Dr. J?
Yeah, I would say, I think, if I pick a winner, Stuart won just in the back and forth. His crowd was probably very happy with it, I'm guessing. And I'm guessing the atheists were a little disappointed with it. So I would just say in general, Stuart probably won. I mean, in spirit, I kind of agree with Batman that nobody won. It wasn't great, but I don't know. I guess I'll pick Stuart.
So in this space on the topic. If we're arguing based on the topic, I would say yeah, no one won from the topic. But who, if we're gonna say, who came away with like, you know, the biggest cheers and the, who won the battle like in the way, it's got to be Stuart, because I'm sorry, when Dan was like, moderator, can you come in? I was like, yeah, that's not going to work on this platform, man. When he kept doing that, he's like, ad hominem, and I'm like, no, you got to be tough and have thick skin. And I felt when you do, I'm going to call it whining. When you do whining, it makes you not look strong. And I think the whole thing about the debate is who looks the strongest, right? Who looks like the one, Stuart just had that poise and composure, and he threw so many barbs at Dan. It was sad. He just kept like punch. He did like I said, I bring up Dragon Ball Z. He did like a flurry of punches in like an instant. Like that's what you see in like the later parts of Dragon Ball Z, and you can't see any of the hits, and you just see the person all beaten up. And I felt that Dan was beaten up pretty bad. I think the point was not on the topic, but he, like, when he said, "Oh, you need help," I'm not saying that was right, but he looks tough and strong. He's like, "Look, I'm mentally sound. Christianity is intellectually empowering me. Look at this atheism. It's sorry. It's sad. This is the path of losers, man. Look at this. Look at this sad state of this poor guy here." And I was like, "Oh man." I was like, "This is embarrassing." And I don't think Dan's arguments were good. I really feel it is on the onus. And then when Dan said it's not on the onus to me, I'm like, yes, it is. You're saying that his position is not true. You have to prove his position's not true. You can't just say, well, you need to prove it. No, he believes Christianity is sound. He made his arguments of why he thinks it's sound. I think that is what he did well in the opening, is he defended why he thinks Christianity is a sound perspective. You have the onus. It is on you to prove that Christianity is unsound. So you have to expose the flaws of Christianity. You have to go and say this is intrinsically Christian. Things like slavery and stuff like that, a person can explain that way and say those were those people. They weren't good Christians, They didn't actually follow Christ, You can do that kind of thing. I'm not saying that is the right thing to do. Like, that's the most ethical, moral thing to do, but I'm saying one could take that position. But I mean, I don't think Dan had any real coherent argument of disproving Christianity. And that's why I think he lost. Whether Stuart won, it doesn't matter, but I think Dan lost. He had to show that Christianity was flawed. He had to show that it's not intellectually, understanding. And then what he did is he tried to tell us about his worldview, why his worldview works. It doesn't matter why your worldview works. Your worldview, it's irrelevant to this conversation. And I think Stuart was very smart, kept like kind of harping on the atheism. Your job is not to defend atheism. Your job is to deconstruct and destroy Christianity. And you failed at that. And just telling us why your worldview works, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Your worldview being right doesn't make Christianity wrong. So you've wasted your time. You've wasted the audience's time. And it just, yeah, it was so underwhelming. And I'm like, you need to do a better job, bro. So, any thoughts on that before we go to the last,
I do have something to say. That.
Yeah,
How
please.
How about you, Doc?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, you brought up earlier too. I didn't even think about it until now. You brought up earlier that you did some research on it. And when I got the notification about who was actually going to be debating, I did do some research as well on Dan, and I was actually kind of surprised about the organizations he's a part of. And I'm surprised he didn't actually bring any sort of anecdotal stories or anything like that from there either to try and make his case. He has an organization that's actually dedicated to trying to get like, I think it was like ex-priests, something like that as well, to try and like reintegrate them into society or something like that, after like leaving religious life. And I'm not sure how successful that particular organization is. And then he has like the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Um, so I'm not sure why it is he didn't actually bring any of those up. That would have actually probably done more to suit his case on that one if he was going to try and make that intellectual argument, because look what it did to these people or whatever. So I'm surprised he didn't bring any of that up.
Maybe some of those were personal stories, and he just wants to really protect them, because sometimes people leaving a religion can be kind of rough for him. So maybe he just doesn't even want to tell stories, even if he doesn't name the people. I don't know.
Yeah, because I didn't look to see like how many people have actually gone through the system. I never looked to see like really anything else about it. I just basically saw the stuff on Wikipedia and was like, okay, that's interesting.
Because I would
So
have, I mean, like, if you're a Christian pastor like me, leaving, if you left, it could be hard just because you don't have any other skills. Like, what job do you get? Like, you don't know how to do anything else. And depending on how old you are, it could be really rough. And depending on the mortgage that you have or whatever, it's like a little hard to start over at 50 or something. And I would imagine it's even more tough for a Catholic priest to do something else. I mean, if you went into the priesthood like right out of school, what do you do? You know what I mean? I assume that's what his organization does. I don't, maybe you looked it up and would know better, but I imagine that's the kind of thing
um
that they do.
yeah, because I don't, it's definitely, it wouldn't just be Catholic priests for sure, because I can't really say too
It
much.
wouldn't
If I'm
just have
familiar
to
with
be
like
Catholic.
Protestant or two. Well, the
It
reason
would.
why I bring it up is because of the call for chastity, or not chastity, poverty. So that's basically, so like you brought up is where part of like reintegrating back into society is they're kind of starting from nothing, because they're essentially, when they do that, they sell all their things. They don't have like really any money of theirs to actually like hold on to or retain or anything like that after they've gone through the whole process and stuff.
They haven't been
So
saving for retirement exactly at the
right.
moment.
There's not exactly a 401k.
Yes.
But it probably would be more for them too, because I'm not sure with like I think with the Orthodox it might be relatively the same way, where they
Mhm.
sort of rely on donations as well, even though
Probably.
they have families as well.
Probably.
Um,
Yep.
but like with Protestant pastors, stuff like that, I'm not sure with them.
Well, I mean, I know how it works for us. I mean, so Protestant pastors could be pastors and work at the same time, or leave being a pastor, go work a regular job, and come back and forth. So it would be easier for Protestant pastors to leave. But if you're an old Protestant pastor and all you've ever been is a pastor, it is hard in the sense that like you don't have skills to do anything else very well. You know what I mean? So it would be a hard
Right.
transition. And some of them, not all, it wouldn't be the case for me. Some of them don't own a home because they've been living in a parsonage, and so it's
Mhm.
just sort of challenging.
Like it kind of like really the only thing you kind of would be well suited for with like, assuming you went through like the seminary background and went through like college for philosophy, theology in general, you're kind of limited in that regard to essentially, yeah, being like a college professor or something.
Absolutely. And so like you might be able to argue, well, I have people skills, and in the long run, maybe that would help you. But when you go to interview the first time, you're like, well, what do you know how to do? Well, I can give a sermon, like, oh, well, great.
Right.
Thanks. I mean,
Hey, you
on
have public
what?
speaking. You can be a politician. You can be a
That's true too.
politician.
You could try to do that, but usually they have connections and know people and whatever. I think it's a tough transition. Not as much when you're younger, because some young people have a hard time anyway, right? You get a generic degree and it can be hard, but the older you are, the harder it is to make the change for sure.
Yeah, it's a particular set of skills, but something that pastors usually have
Skills that
too
make you
is
dangerous for
like
women like you. Sorry.
that's cute. I'm thinking like being a counselor. A lot of pastors usually do like pastoral counseling, so you might go into chaplaincy or something like that. There is things you can do, but it's more limited. I get what you mean.
I totally think chaplaincy is a place of where pastors who are either aren't sure if they believe anymore, or they're burned out from pastoring and they don't want to be a pastor anymore. I think that's often what chaplains are. Not always, but I think that is a place that they go. But there's only so many of those jobs, there's not an infinite number of hospitals and whatnot to be able to get.
Prisons, yeah. No, you're right. But I'm saying that's one route you could go, but it's more limited.
And on the counseling front, you have to get extra education if you want like a really good counseling job, not a chaplaincy job, but if you want to be like an actual therapist or whatever, you would need to like get another master's or something.
Yeah, you need to get some like licensure in counseling. That would be important. So I wanted to address one point here. And that's fine. I completely understand why a person would say this. There's a reason why I'm saying the point that I'm saying. They're saying, the burden of the proof is upon the claimant, not the one denying the claim. There's not really a claim here. You're saying the point is Christianity intellectually, indefensible? Well, why would we assume that it isn't? You know what I'm saying? I would say it's just kind of like the sun rising up and the sun going down. Why would we think that Christianity is indefensible? Like, the point is that that's pretty much the standard that we would see as a defensible thing. A bunch of people are Christian. What's the reason why we wouldn't believe that? And I think that's it's different than saying I have a flying unicorn. Like, that's what's mentioned later about if there's a flying unicorn in my garage, there's a certain difficulty of credibility. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, why should I believe, why would I take a secular humanist approach? There's reasonings, I guess, but it's like, I'm probably, in the way that I see it, I just would say, okay, if this is a thing that works for you, cool. Like, I don't care. That's kind of my point of view. But I'm like, if you're going to say that the thing is false, well, why is it false? I mean, I think that that's an important question. So, yeah.
All right. Well, I need to go. I'll do my final wrap up here, if you don't mind, and I'm gonna.
Oh yeah, we're doing our final thoughts. That's what we're gonna do. We're going right to final thoughts. That's the last thing.
All right. I think I've said most of what I've said. Thanks, Batman, for jumping on. Issa, always great to talk to you. Looking forward to doing more debates in the future. Enjoyed this one. I think it's interesting. This is maybe the first time we've had a mostly a theist panel. So that's different. Obviously, usually it's dominated by atheists, oftentimes. So it's a little bit different. But hey, that's how we do things on our channel, which I can't pronounce. So anyway, great to see everybody. Look forward to doing more of these and doing more content. Great to see you guys.
And thank you for having me on, by the way.
Well, you're most welcome. Do you have any final thoughts, Batman?
To summarize it all in one word from the debate, lame.
That is hilarious. Okay, so I have a very short thing. I said a lot already. So I just needed to see more from I think Dan Barker needed to do better for me personally. I just felt that it was lacking. I agree with both of you that I think it was kind of just a fail altogether. I think there was overconfidence, and yeah, that's it. So, like, subscribe, put it in the chat. We're just so excited that we have you. We had our first kind of primarily theist panel, which is really new for this channel.
It was an accident. It was an accident. We didn't even do it on purpose.
Yes, it was an accident. And so, we just are so thankful that you came, and we just are having a great time on, Yerba Mate Talks. So, thanks again. And we are going to go into our countdown.